Pennsylvania, as I'm sure many of you can relate to. So as Dan mentioned, I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at DCNR, and I am really excited to talk to you today about the issue of connecting certain underserved populations with the outdoors, recognizing that there is such a tremendous power in terms of nature and the overall health benefits. So, many of us come to an issue from our own personal experiences. And I want to introduce you to Jack. So Jack is my husband's father, my father-in-law, and he spent a lot of time in nursing homes in the last couple of years. And in trying to improve his quality of life, when we would visit him, we would take him outdoors. And we were fortunate there was a corridor, there was oftentimes you can't see them now, but this picture has our two pups, his grand pups on his lap. And he would just enjoy being outside. The nature elements were very therapeutic to him. And, just to sit in the sunshine, honestly, could change his mood. And we would go back inside and the residents would greet us and they would say, "Oh, what is it like to be outside? I don't go outside. I haven't been out in months." And honestly, I believe them, because if you didn't have a visitor willing to take you outside, you're really not likely to get outdoors. I will note that Jack was in the nursing home last year. He had contracted COVID, and we were able to get him out. There's this wonderful program called the.
So I would just like to know, I know that there's a lot of different folks, different types of therapy that you may provide, different clients you may serve. So I was hoping that you could just share that with us right now.
I put a poll up on the screen. If everybody could take a minute to answer that, who you primarily provide care to. And yes, we have many people responding already, so that's great. Know that we're all working here. I'm going to leave it and share the results, and everybody can see.
Great. Yeah, so this is a great mix. So we have folks in different types of rehab situations. A lot of you are really taking care of seniors in long-term or assisted living care facilities. That's great. I'm hoping to have a conversation as we, go through this presentation, just to understand a little bit more about what's happening on the ground and how you might be able to help us kind of move this forward from your perspective. So you're probably wondering, well, why does DCNR care about this? And quite frankly, it's an element of our mission. We want to ensure that we are protecting and conserving resources for today and future generations. And part of our Pennsylvania statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan calls out the need to provide recreation for all. In fact, it's the title of our plan. And that means improving access to ensure that people have equitable access, that they are, that we're removing some of the barriers that might exist. Also ensuring that programs and services are available to a diverse and equitable group of individuals. Inclusiveness, of course, is a key component of this. And so how can DCNR partner with agencies and stakeholders who are already working in this community? How can we help them support these goals of connecting people to the outdoors for the elderly, particularly those living in long-term care facilities, those who are homebound or have other barriers as well? I did a presentation a couple of months ago for the Long-Term Care Council under the Department of Aging. And I was reviewing their state plan on aging as well. And there's a lot of parallels and a lot of opportunities for us to build connections and collaborate. Certainly looking at how we can expand partnerships to grow the aging network's capacity to deliver services. building and strengthening those partnerships, hoping to support organizations that are already serving diverse or isolated older adults, helping them to improve those outreach opportunities. We all know social isolation is such a tremendous issue within facilities, and COVID has only compounded that. Really trying to leverage the experience and the resources that exist. Our volunteer networks tend to be older adults, so how can we maximize their talent, their interest to support services that will benefit those in the the elderly community, and of course looking at even virtual programming, because the reality is there are people who may just not be able to get outdoors, and virtual programming through those cool goggles or through some kind of virtual videos can really serve and provide benefits. So yeah, I'm just going to yeah. So certainly, as I mentioned, social isolation has been compounded by COVID-19. We've seen some of our most vulnerable populations who have had to experience some of the most significant mitigation measures, and for good reason, certainly. But this meant some significant disconnections from the world, from family, friends. Certainly in-person visits were halted. In some cases, even you're seeing this, window visit, which we experienced with Jack up until COVID hit their facility. Once COVID hits the facility, then the facilities were even stopping these visits, because basically people had to be quarantined in their rooms. That means that they're limited in terms of access to other residents. Certainly group activities at times were suspended. And all through this, you had staffing challenges where you had people who maybe had to take off because of COVID diagnosis, or certainly we're seeing staffing challenges right now for a number of reasons. Volunteers were unable to come in, and even as facilities started to open their doors to volunteers, because a number of these are older folks, it meant that they decided they had to make a decision. Well, do they want to do this, to continue to do this and potentially risk their health, or look at other potential volunteer opportunities? And so a lot of facilities lost volunteers. And then you have to think back even before COVID-19 and remember that there were a number of residents that did not regularly have visitors even before the pandemic hit. Next slide. So, we all felt the impact of COVID. I would like you just to reflect on those feelings, those feelings of loneliness and hopelessness and depression, and we all felt it at some point. But we all, for the most part, also had an opportunity to either communicate with people, to be with people, to be outdoors, whether it's walking out into your yard or taking a walk at a park. Whereas these individuals really felt the full effects of social isolation. I mean, consider how these people felt living in these nursing homes, really isolated from so many aspects of their life. Next slide. And we know that social isolation has significant health impacts. We know that according to the National Institute of Health, it provides isolation and loneliness are related to a number of health factors, not just physiological, but mental wellness as well. Certainly anxiety and depression can feed in, and even death can be attributed to social isolation. So it's a serious issue, which is why so many agencies, so many stakeholders who support the aging community recognize that something has to be done and have been working on this for quite some time. Next slide. Meanwhile, as COVID was happening, and DCNR knows this firsthand, an unprecedented number of people sought solace in the outdoors, recognizing the mental and physical health benefits of spending time in nature. And we saw it in our state parks, we saw it on our trails, And so it really was a tremendous relief for many people who felt like their sense of normalcy was off track because of COVID, but they could go outdoors and they could not only experience a sense of normalcy, but also experience those benefits. Next slide. So I do want to take a moment and ask you, do you believe exposure to nature can improve one's overall health and wellness? And just take a moment to do that poll. And we'll give you a couple seconds to yes or no, or maybe not sure, and that's fine too. But I'm interested in hearing what your personal experience is, or what your research shows.
So the poll's been open for about
Dan?
the poll's been open for about 25 seconds. We have several answers, and actually we have a lot of answers. I'm going to end the polling and share the responses. Looks like you're preaching to the choir here.
I'm preaching to the choir, and I love it. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. And I think that's so it's important to have people who really believe in this idea to make action and to make progress. So thank you for that. Next slide. So yes, here at DCNR, we really do consider the outdoors essential. We consider our parks and trails an essential service, and no time other than the COVID-19 has that been more evident, honestly. But there are a number of studies and research, a lot of research out there to demonstrate this as well. So we know that exposure to the outdoors and the direct sunlight can improve one's overall well-being. So there's the mental and the wellness aspects of this. We also know that physiologically, absorption of vitamin D can provide a more restful sleep and can actually reduce falls and fractures. As I mentioned with Jack, and here you can see him with his grand pups, Lacey and Willow, the sunlight really did reduce stress, his frustration, his agitation. We saw a marked difference when we brought him outside. Yes, it's anecdotal, but it is meaningful to us, as I'm sure it is meaningful to many of you when you see that change in your residents or your family members. Certainly, the sensory stimulation can decrease boredom and hopelessness and depression, and that leads to also stimulating the mind, improving quality of life. It can improve equilibrium, and especially for those with dementia, there have been studies that demonstrate the marked improvement and benefits for these individuals who are spending time outdoors. So again, being outdoors is essential for our physical and mental health. And so why aren't we making it a priority when it comes to some of these individuals who particularly would benefit maybe even more from these experiences? Next slide. So I included a handout that Dan will circulate, which provides links and research papers that I incorporated into my presentation or reference as a part of my presentation. I thought this was an interesting literature review where they went back and looked at dozens of studies that looked at how outdoor-based intervention supports either physiological or psychological well-being, and the results were markedly impressive. In fact, that nature-based exposure has a positive effect on different emotional parameters related to stress relief. Now, they did note that it wasn't as evident in terms of the physiological, and they attribute that to perhaps the control groups. And so I urge you to read this study and just take a look at what their research structure was, what their methodology was, because I think it does provide some really good background information on why this is important. Next slide. I also want to point out Howard Frumpkin. So he is with the Trust for Public Land, and he was also the professor emeritus of environmental and occupational health services. He is a true believer, like I think many of us here. And this quote I thought was really important because it points out that one, on the healthcare side of things, they're not necessarily linking the two. So they're not necessarily incorporating the benefits, the health benefits of the outdoors or the potential health benefits into potential therapy or recovery. And then simultaneously, I think is improving, and it's improving on both sides, honestly. But you also have the environmental and the conservation world that didn't necessarily make the link to the health benefits. Now, there's certainly some progress along this. In fact, in Pennsylvania, we have a number of nature RX programs, which are basically doctors that are committing to writing prescriptions for walking outdoors for those individuals that they feel that exposure, that experience will improve their quality of life and their overall well-being. So that is happening. It's happening in Center Region, in Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, but we would certainly like to see that expanded. And I also note that when we talk about contact with natural environment, some have broken it into a couple of different groups. So contact with animals, which there is a lot of work too in regards to animal therapy, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Again, I can testify to that just from our personal experience, how, we would walk into the room and Jack would, look at me and he'd say, well, where are the dogs? So, and he'd love to have them on his lap. Contact with plants, viewing landscapes, and again, that contact or exposure to the outdoors, nature, and wilderness. So I have also just done some research on how nature supports recovery. Again, some of these links are incorporated into that document that I shared with Dan, which he'll share with you. Certainly, when it comes to surgical or injury recovery, this may be someone who has a view of nature outside their window versus someone who might just have a brick wall. It may be taking individuals outside during portions of their recovery, or even taking it further and kind of exposing them to nature, forest bathing, etc. And, time after time, in fact, within the drug and alcohol rehab, there are so many new programs now, I don't know how new, but you're probably familiar with this, where it's forest-based or nature-based recovery programs that incorporate these elements of wilderness and nature and wonder into that process. So from very far-reaching different types of recovery aspects, heart attacks, strokes, PTSD. In Pennsylvania alone, we have so many programs that connect wounded warriors and veterans to the outdoors, whether it's fishing or hunting or kayaking, hiking, camping, because again, they recognize the soothing elements that nature provides and supports and really increases their overall quality of life and contentment. I'll also point out this is an interesting study as well. The European Center for Environment and Human Nature found that people who spend 2 hours a week outdoors were substantially more likely to report good health and psychological well-being. Again, this is more of a mental wellness component. It certainly can contribute to your physiological well-being, but to me, it just really reinforces how we perceive these experiences and why they're so important, and why we want to make sure that we're offering them to those, particularly those underserved and vulnerable. The COVID vaccine, the pandemic certainly exposed some of the issues related to how our systems are fragile in regards to providing care for certain populations, And this, of course, includes underserved communities, poor communities, communities of color. And so I just want to emphasize how this pandemic has impacted underserved communities. Really, they may already be, they have financial or health disparities in place. There may be lack of services or resources or insurance that contributes to these discrepancies, to these the disparities, and understanding too that workforce challenges, volunteer recruitment has continued to plague these facilities as well. It's universal for sure, but in certain areas, certainly underserved communities have felt the impacts even more and even stronger. But I will argue that the elderly in general, as a population, are significantly underserved when it comes to experiencing recreational access to the outdoors. So those living in long-term care facilities are dependent, and you know this, they're dependent on visitors or volunteers or staff to get outdoors. Many of them, personal care facilities where people are a little bit more agile, they may have the ability to go outdoors on their own. But if you're living in a wheelchair, if you're dependent on a wheelchair or even a walker, that increases the challenges and the barriers for you to get outdoors. And, we can't have this conversation, honestly, without talking about these capacity issues. And this is a crisis. We're experiencing a crisis across the board in our long-term care facilities, personal care facilities, even home care, where you're having a staffing crisis. This has occurred throughout the pandemic, and it continues to occur for a variety of reasons. So before COVID, there were capacity limitations that made it difficult for facilities to connect, to make these connections happen regularly. But now it's even more profound. Volunteer capacity has been, historically limited. Some facilities may do a really good job of having this kind of robust collection of volunteers. Usually that might mean they have a full-time volunteer coordinator, which again means that they have to have the resources to have that in place, to have that staffing in place. And we have seen through COVID that you have less volunteers, you have less individuals just willing to come in and potentially expose themselves to COVID. That hopefully is improving as the vaccines are more widespread, but it's still a challenge. We also know that there are facilities that just don't have, they may just not have the capacity to train volunteers. And we know that is a component of it. Volunteers need to have background checks in many cases. You want to make sure that you are protecting this vulnerable population. And again, staff time is also necessary to have to prep residents. They may have medical issues, et cetera. So there's a lot of layers to understanding how we can improve access to the outdoors. And we certainly do have some challenges at the facility level. There are also certainly, this is Jack again, outdoors. And again, this was a nice corridor where we had an opportunity to sit outside with him. He would read his newspaper, watch the dogs go crazy over the squirrels. But some facilities don't have this outdoor setting. I know of several facilities that are located in hospitals, where they don't have that direct access, or there's just certain layers of barriers that prevent that access from happening. Some, if they do have outdoor space, may be limited. So it may only accommodate a certain number of individuals, or it may not have seating or shaded areas or even natural features that really support that stimulation and cognitive opportunities that allow people to really enjoy all aspects of nature. Some facilities may be in close walking distance to local parks and trails, but lack staff volunteer capacity. So, I mentioned we took Jack down to the river walk, down to show him the Susquehanna River. It was maybe, I don't know, a half mile or a quarter mile. It wasn't a huge distance, but we were able to do it because we're his family and we took the time to do it. For the staff to coordinate something like that, that would be a tremendous amount of work. And then you also have some facilities that may be close to driving or driving distance to local state parks, but lack that transportation because there's just not affordable options or just the transportation capacity in general. And transportation certainly is a barrier when we're talking about this issue. So I would ask, I just want to take another poll here and ask, what are some of the greatest barriers in connecting your residents or clients to the outdoors? And you can select as many as you want because I'm sure there's multiple barriers, and please feel free to do that. Give you a few seconds to do this. Thank you for participating in this. This is really helpful for me to understand and what's happening on the ground and in these facilities.
Yes, your feedback is important for Nicole as she's going forward with all this information and research. We got about 2/3 of our group has participated. I'm going to give it about another 10 seconds and then we'll close the poll. And we'll close it in 3, 2, 1. And we'll share. There's your results.
Okay. Would we be able to share, would we be able to, I guess this is recorded so we can see that in the recording, but.
Yes, that's correct.
So is there anyone who would like to share a personal story about a barrier that they may have experienced? If you want to put your hand up, or if you want to, we can unmute you. Is that a possibility, Dan?
They can unmute themselves by clicking on the little microphone. Youssef has his hand up. Go ahead, Youssef.
So I'm not a licensed rec therapist yet, but I've done something similar to their services. But I've worked with with children with either incarcerated parents, trouble fitting in, and etc. But one issue I had was when I wanted to take the kids outside. This was before COVID. A lot of the kids could not because one of the greatest barriers was that some of them used wheelchairs, and the door at the time would not accommodate them to go outside. Or that if for another example, if we do go outside and it would sometimes be with several kids, but no one else would be able to watch them, and it would just be me. So I would say a lack of administrative help and architectural support can be a barrier.
That's yeah. Thank you, Yusuf. That's very, very helpful. I imagine that you're requiring that administrative support just to help people, because you may have a lot of individuals who may just not be able to wheel themselves. So that requires manpower and coordination. And you also, like you said, just the basic barrier of a door, which is really sad to hear, honestly. So thank you. Anyone else? We'll have opportunity for conversation at the end, but I just wanted to pause here because I think it is really demonstrative of the how we can move this forward, understanding these barriers and really trying to recognize potential solutions as well. And I guess that can be another question for you. And again, it doesn't have to be right now, but think about if you've experienced a barrier where you've been able to overcome that barrier in connecting your resident or client to the outdoors. So we can move on. So, as we're thinking about how we make these connections realistic, we also have to understand the risks associated with this vulnerable population. And we know that there's medical conditions. So, for example, Jack had a colostomy bag. So we had to, you have a measured amount of time that you might be able to take him from place to place or to be outside. You may have individuals who are on oxygen or are diabetic that require medication. We've talked about the mobility limitations and the fact that they might just need assistance just to get outside. Then there's also those mental and cognitive deficiencies and making sure that someone that is there and is trusted to kind of help them understand the new environment and make them feel safe. Weather conditions, of course, and with climate change, the weather is always changing, and extreme weather is never seems to be too far away. So that's another condition or a consideration we have to make. And just basic safety precautions, making sure you might need to have individuals who know basic first aid that are comfortable with this situation. So that that flows into volunteer training needs and also volunteer background checks. I think we moved to my next slide there. So background checks are important. Some facilities may require them. Some facilities may have some flexibility. I think that overall, you just want to ensure that you have people there for the right reasons and that they are, we don't want anyone taking advantage of a very vulnerable population. There may be facilities that also require liability waivers, and that might make the facility feel more comfortable. I know talking to a couple of different stakeholders within the industry, that was an issue that came up for sure. And of course, COVID-19 remains a constant threat. So I like this picture. I just found it on the internet, but I thought I didn't add the language. The language was there. But I would just ask if you could take a moment to share in the chat your favorite outdoor place or your favorite outdoor activity. Just curious how you might use the natural outdoors as an escape or an opportunity to improve your wellness. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Hiking, rock climbing. Oh, that's you're adventurous. A lot of kayaking. Oh, awesome. Hiking in state parks and forests. Oh, yes, I love the Vermont mountains too. Roller skating. Interesting. Nice. Horseback riding, mountain biking. In my yard. I love to play in my yard too. I get that. The Schuylkill River Trails. Awesome. Gardening. Cook Forest State Park. Lots of state parks. I love it. Being near rushing water. Yeah, very nice. Hiking, climbing, kayaking. Awesome. Thank you. That's great. I share a lot of your interest, and it just is evident to me that so many of you really do personally experience the outdoors and recognize the benefits and how it makes you feel. So that's great. And you're in a high stress position, so I imagine the outdoors is helpful for a variety of reasons as well. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities, and these are some of the opportunities that I have envisioned. Certainly, I think that we should be celebrating the people, the residents and the staff who have endured this pandemic, who have worked so hard and have suffered and endured so much. Months of social isolation, months of fear. And, you know, I have a picture here of V-Day from World War II, when World War II finally ended. And I envisioned something similar. You know, I had hoped maybe by, you know, September 30th, 2021, we would have had this victory day against COVID. But I feel like, you know, is there an opportunity for us to have a parade of folks from these facilities and shine a light on them, let them be experience well, the outdoors for one, but also let us appreciate what they've endured, and let us celebrate that they have been able to survive this, those fortunate to have survived. I see it as an opportunity to educate long-term care staff around the benefits of outdoor experiences for residents. I had reached out to a Activity Directors Association in early 2020 to talk this through. And of course, I started these conversations before COVID, and once COVID hit, it became a real challenge. But my thinking was, well, what if we advance these conversations so that once things are safe, we have something in place that may be an opportunity for folks to enjoy the outdoors. And some really good conversations with the Activity Directors Association, because they're, you know, just like you, they have the one-on-one experience. They are on the ground. They know the residents. They know the people. They know the needs, and they believe in this. And so I thought it was great conversation. And I'll share a little bit about what they ended up doing as a result of some of those conversations. I think it's an opportunity to build public awareness around the harmful impacts of social isolation, particularly, and loneliness for long-term care residents. And then, of course, just the benefits of the outdoors. But I think that this is an opportunity for us to get the communities to rally and to demonstrate, to show support for people who live in these long-term care facilities, who are homebound and isolated, and demonstrate that there is a need here. These people do need some additional opportunities to ensure that they are having access to a higher quality of life. I think we can strengthen those connections with existing volunteer networks. There's so many volunteering opportunities out there. I also think about it, you know, those individuals who love to go for walks. Well, what if you just stopped at your nursing home and took, you know, someone, you know, you go through the background check and you say, I'm going to take so-and-so for a walk today because I go for a walk every day. So why shouldn't I just take someone with me? I think it's an opportunity to elevate need for volunteers. And also, you know, you can, the outdoor elements, you know, how we can demonstrate to facilities how important it is to incorporate those elements, you know, whether it's improving outdoor spaces, whether it's bringing natural elements inside. So we've talked about maybe doing murals or, you know, again, virtual programming, but that even murals have been demonstrated to show natural elements, improving quality of life, improving overall mental wellness, etc. So I think it's just, this is an opportunity where we can demonstrate why this is important and why we need additional resources, particularly around volunteers and commitment from facilities to support these kinds of programs.
Nicole, before you go on, there was a comment in the chat box from Leanne saying that all our nursing staff take our residents outside to our courtyards because they know how beneficial it is for them and for themselves.
That's awesome. Thanks, Leanne, for sharing. I'm glad to hear that. And maybe you can share a little bit more at the end of the program how you're able to do that, because I would love to learn more about that. Elevating awareness, I think, again, is really pivotal in this. And again, you know, I throw out this idea of a statewide day of awareness. I think it's important. One, it can bring attention to the issues of social isolation. Some states have made this an issue and elevated this, whether it's a month or a day that they're bringing this to the public's attention. Again, I think we should be celebrating the residents and the staff who have endured so much during this pandemic. You know, is there a statewide parade that we could help organize that would get people outdoors, maybe get people to realize the need for volunteers and the need to connect these individuals to the outdoors, and again, the facilities to prioritize this as well from a programming perspective. And of course, educating community on the needs for volunteers is fundamental. We might be able to establish some kind of volunteer recruitment from a statewide perspective, maybe working with existing volunteer pipelines, developing regional pilot projects. This is something that I'm working on now. Been working with the Department of Aging to send an email out to some different regions just to identify facilities that might be interested in developing a regional project, us working with them, hopefully acquiring some grant funding that could help them facilitate the pilot, and really helping to demonstrate and reinforce why this is important, and also kind of you know, figure out, well, what works and what doesn't work, so that other places can implement as well. And you know, the reality is that some residents just aren't able to get outdoors, whether it's just the limitations of the facility or the limitations of the individual. And you know, is there an opportunity for us to work with community partners to green the long-term care facilities, community spaces, add those natural elements, again, that I think can provide such increased quality of life overall. Nature programs or virtual experiences are all ways that we can bring nature to these residents. I did want to note, so as I mentioned earlier, the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, we call it SCORP, and you know, through that there is that health and wellness component, and one of the activities and objectives that we looked at is building a stronger partnership with the medical community. And so there's a great organization called Walk with a Doc. And so we organized in September, it was Trails Month, so we capitalized on that. We organized events across the state, not just DCNR, but local, regional, local, regional, and community partners also organized events where you walk with a doc, and you have you know, a doctor who is actually escorting people and talking to them, and they get them outdoors. They reinforce why the outdoors is such an important part of your natural wellness regime. And it was really a good program. We did a launch event in Danville with the Geisinger. We partnered with Geisinger. So I think that, you know, we can improve those connections. The Pennsylvania Medical Society also participated in that. I dream of this, you know, walk with a doc, where we might get doctors from long-term care facilities who might be willing to organize this, and again, requires a lot of volunteer work, I imagine, but it would be great to see those kinds of events happening with long-term care facilities as well. So it's just a neat program and something to potentially look into as a partnership with some of what you may already be doing. I also noticed the organization, so I had met a couple times with the Lehigh Valley Activity Professionals Association, and there was a number of folks there who felt really connected to this work and felt passionate about it. And they decided to organize a day in the summer just to get their members. They encouraged all of their member facilities to host a 1 or 2 hour outdoor event. And, you know, again, it was an idea, it was an opportunity to put awareness, organize a day of awareness where they're shining the light on this issue, and positive light, because the long-term care facilities endured so much negative press and negativity across the pandemic. And this was an opportunity to really show the appreciation to the staff and the residents. So they also wanted to demonstrate the benefits of the outdoors, in doing so, combating social isolation, and also demonstrating that this is something that you can do. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's something that, you know, you can, I say easily, I know that's easier for me to say than for you to do, but, you know, how can we relatively easily incorporate these outdoor experiences into the long-term care activity program? So it was a cool event, and it was just really great to see different facilities take on this challenge and get people outdoors. Like I said, I included a number of different resources in that handout for you. You know, resources from state and local accessible trails through SCORP, our recreation plan. We are trying to identify where trails, you know, easy loops or trails that are easily accessible from a wheelchair perspective or from a walker perspective, that are low grade and just make it easy for people to access. So we're working on mapping those out, which will maybe be a good resource for many of you. I recognize transportation is a tremendous barrier. And, you know, I throw out, there's a program through the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation called Wilderness Wheels Program. And they provide grants or reimbursement grants to facilities that would like to connect their residents to state parks and forests. Now, this is not available statewide, and I did provide a link. And if you have interest in you particularly have a program that you would like to connect, let me know, because I have conversations with them, and I know that they're looking at expanding the program. It takes funding, of course, but I think it's just an exceptional way to support these kinds of endeavors. I'll also know, and you all know this, the aging transportation, it's hit or miss, I know, from county to county. We were fortunate with Jack where, you know, we were able to get him on a CAT bus and bring him home. We would bring him to our home. We would sit outside. And in fact, I remember the one day we were sitting outside, and he says to, you know, John and I, my husband, he says, "Oh, there's a puppy deer." And we both look behind us and we see nothing. And I think, oh, I hope this isn't like, you know, him having an issue with dementia. And I just kind of casually walked over to the edge of the field to see if I could see anything. And there at the very bottom of our yard was a fawn. And so it was a really cool experience for him. And it was probably the last time, you know, that kind of wildlife, because he was a hunter all of his life. So that meant a lot to us. You know, certainly programming support. You know, we have our DCNR state parks and educators that can potentially provide some support. We have a network of environmental education centers and educators as well, and I'm happy to try to make those connections. Get Outdoors PA, which PRPS actually manages and organizes. I talked to Nikki at PRPS to see if there might be opportunities there. And so we might want to think through about how we could support you know, programming for a land trust or for a nature center to come to a facility and provide some programming. There's tons of volunteer networks, I know, and I've talked to several of them. RSVP, which is the Retired Seniors Volunteer Program, I think is a great opportunity and network, and could potentially be a great fit for something like this. As I mentioned, a lot of the volunteers that support long-term care facilities, as you know, are older, but I think that, you know, they just have the flexibility because they're retired and they still have a passion for the work. And, you know, grant funding, there are a few sources there. Department of Aging, AARP had a grant. I don't know if that's going to be year to year, but it did have a lot of these elements in place that could support a program like this. Certainly local foundations and businesses may be interested. So, you know, how can we build this and package this so that we could establish a couple of pilot programs just to demonstrate why this is important. I say we should start small and think big. So in my mind, if we can get people outside you know, in a garden a couple days a week, and that's probably thinking really big, then I think that's progress. But there's also even bigger things that can be done, and this is a great example of that. Two programs that I had found, Nantucket Wheelers and Cycling Without Age. And Cycling Without Age was founded in the Netherlands, and because biking is such a huge component of their lifestyle, and they realized that people who could no longer physically bike still miss that experience of the wind in your hair and that freedom that we all know comes with that biking experience. And so they have these trishaws that are developed. In fact, there's a company that distributes them here in Pennsylvania. There is at least one chapter of Cycling Without Age in Pennsylvania, but it's a really cool program. You know, my thinking was, well, maybe we could purchase a couple of these trishaws. You need to ensure you have a trained volunteer network, of course. But if you had these bikes at a state park where the facilities could send folks over and experience this, I think it would be honestly tremendous. So I throw this out here just as another way of connecting people to the outdoors, and certainly a cool program for sure. I threw out, we're all about metrics, I guess, these days, and I know it's difficult to really demonstrate how these outdoor programs or outdoor experiences, you know, provide immediate benefits or improve quality of life, because some of this isn't as easily measured. I throw a couple of ideas out there. I mean, certainly I think we can look at how we've increased capacity for facilities, whether it's, you know, providing programming, or how we're the number of residents who are getting outdoors, or how volunteers are increasing to support this type of program. Certainly loneliness scales are also a potential method to measure how a program like this could improve the quality of life overall of these individuals. So I guess I asked this question, and I hope we can have a discussion. How likely are you to explore opportunities to improve outdoor access to your clients and residents? And let's talk about why some of these programs might be beneficial. And I realize we may be short on time here, so I don't want to go over either. So Dan, you can tell me and yell at me if I'm way over here.
No, we have time, Nicole. We have time.
Okay, great. So take a minute and just share your answer on this, and then let's have a conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say now, prior to the pandemic, probably a couple years before, back in 2016, first of all, we're blessed to have wheelchair buses, handicap buses. So, but we took two of our handicap buses. We had about maybe 13, 14, maybe 15 or 16 residents, and each one of them had a staff person, a volunteer, or a family member that met us there. And we took them up to the Northwest Bike Trail, which is what I like to bike on. And because our buses wouldn't go under the underpass, we actually parked outside and we wheeled the residents down. Some went to the pavilion to sit there and just watch the river, and then the other half went on a bike trail. We've also been to the Pride of the Susquehanna. We went on that boat ride back in, that was a long time ago, in 2010. And we do regularly take our residents out. Now, we haven't since the pandemic, just because they don't want the residents so close together. However, we did take them out to the park there in New Holland, because we are really close to the New Holland Park, which the they have their summer arts program and there are concerts there. So a lot of times the residents aren't necessarily interested in the music, what's playing. They like being outdoors with the rest of the community. And then coming back, when we walk them back, we have blinkers to hold on to for protection. But they have so many times have explained how nice it is to be out on a summer's evening and see the stars and the moon, because that they don't see very often.
Oh, that's great to hear. What is your first name and what county are you in?
I'm in Lancaster County. My name's Lori. I'm at Garden Spot Village in New Holland.
So Lori, can I ask so you mentioned a couple events where you were able to take folks outside, actually transport, and it sounds like that requires a lot of capacity. So can you talk a little bit about how you manage that? What resources did you have that made that possible?
Well, like I said, we do own 2 wheelchair handicap buses, which made it really easy. And because I'm in a retirement community, at that time, there were a lot more volunteers and I had a lot more people in my staff, which right now I don't, working on it. And the other thing is too, family members were so excited to be able to go with a loved one to a place like this because they themselves could not get them there. And they were all pretty much wheelchair. I don't want to say wheelchair bound because obviously when they're back at the place, they're not totally wheelchair bound. But we had one lady who was probably maybe end stage dementia. She's still with us, but she has always enjoyed going to any place where there's a river or there's a lake or a stream. In fact, her daughter was so tickled because I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's get her. Let's just take her. And the daughter then came and met her there at Northwest Bike Trail. And she was so tickled to death that, you know, we could bring her mom, even though her mom's not one, all she does pretty much is smile. But I think a lot of times she knows what's going on and she would make eye contact. But I was really pleased that we were able to do that for her mom.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. And it's great that you have the buses. That's half the battle, honestly, is that
That
transportation.
is very, very helpful. Absolutely. Without them, well, we'd have to go in with walking distance most of the time.
Yeah. Anyone else? I did want to read, Leanne shared that they have 4 indoor courtyards and sidewalks around our campus. Sometimes they spend their lunch or their breaks outside. That's beautiful. So they know how important it is for our COVID recovering residents to get the fresh air. It's a great bonding opportunity. I can imagine that is. I love that you're encouraging families to take folks outside. So that's great too. That's wonderful. Anyone else want to share maybe an experience that you had, or it looks like from the poll that pretty much 100% of you are somewhat or very likely to do this. So it sounds like you guys are practicing this, and I would love to hear some anecdotes or more experiences. And maybe if there's particular barriers that you have experienced and overcome or are still challenged with. I know again the staff and the volunteers are probably a huge part of that.
Oh, let's hear from somebody. Oh, there's a local buffalo farm near us and our residents like to get up close to them. However, it's a farm and that's a barrier.
Wait, did you just say a local buffalo farm?
That's the way it's written, yes.
Like an actual buffaloes?
Yes, they raise buffaloes there.
Okay, I'm moving to Pennsylvania now. That's interesting.
Yes, we had a buffalo farm up near us as well, so I'm not shocked by that, honestly. And that's yeah. I imagine with the barrier is just the terrain. It must be difficult just to get over that. Yeah.
I think there's a wolf sanctuary too here in Lancaster County, and again, I think it's the terrain that would cause problems for the wheelchairs. Although we've managed to go over some terrain, but I was a lot younger then too. But
yeah, I bet. I know places like Hawk Mountain now, that's not, that's a drive. Pennsylvania's a big state. So when I mentioned one place, it's not necessarily a place that everyone can get to, but I know that they had recently incorporated a accessible trail as well. And I'm curious if there are any facilities that may have been benefited from that or facilities like it.
well, that's nice to know. Maybe I'll do that sometime.
And Nicole, don't sell the state park short. Most state parks have some really great accommodations for people with various abilities, and you know, a lot of them come with lakes and water features.
Absolutely.
So I love going to the state parks.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are, like I said, working on that mapping component just to provide a little bit more, make it more accessible or easily decipherable as to where these trails are. You know, part of the challenge is just defining what an easy trail is or an easy loop trail. So we're trying to look at it from a characteristics perspective. You know, the grade, you know, how steep or what the incline is, you know, what the material of the trail is, you know, the distance from a parking lot to the trail. Those kinds of things I think are really important in factoring whether this trail is a feasible trail for folks in long-term care facilities in general.
Well, there's some more in the chat here. Let's see. We have a large walking courtyard at my facility. We have multiple doors with no issues for wheelchairs. Large awning above the patio, which exits straight from my main activity room. So great connection right there. Tracy works.
Hey, I wonder. Oh, go ahead.
Tracy's works in an inpatient unit courtyard, but too many patients have escaped. So our upper management ended the use of the courtyard. Now that's always an issue. We were able to overcome that with the help of our nursing manager. We contracted with a local fencing company to put up unclimbable fence. So far, only 2 patients were able to scale it.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Yeah, Jack used to be a flight risk too, and you know, not that he could necessarily maneuver himself down onto the main floor, but that's not to say he didn't try. So yeah, that's an important factor for sure. And I wondered about that. So how much do individuals, you know, I work under the assumption that many of these facilities are, you know, what is the freedom level of certain residents for them to just go outdoors if they have the physical ability to do that? You know, especially considering some of the mental cognitive challenges that may exist, or facilities more or less, you know, they have to be signed out by, you know, a staff person or a family member or a volunteer. I don't know if anyone has a comment about that.
I know that some of our buildings, residents can go out freely. They have, you know, access to their outdoor space right off of their main level. And in my community, which is skilled nursing, our residents who are able to propel themselves with their wheelchair are able to take themselves out, you know, as long as they wear a mask and things like that. But a lot of our residents aren't able to do that. And they're completely reliant on the recreation team. And our ratio is 50-1. So it's just a very unmanageable number for us right now. And without having volunteers and without having staff, that's a huge barrier for us. And one of the most challenging, I think, is especially for our people living with dementia. We're up on the 4th floor and there is just no access to the outdoors for them. They can't even just, you know, we can't even just open doors or anything like that. So that's a big challenge. They're really separated, and that's who we see a really big impact on going outside, especially with like the circadian rhythm and just things like that. Yeah. So it's really challenging, but it's so beneficial.
Brett,
And,
thanks for sharing. I was curious if you have attempted kind of, are there opportunities to incorporate natural elements on the floor or in some of the public areas that might stimulate or provide some benefits to some of the residents there?
Yes, so during COVID, we started incorporating a lot of house plants, especially ones that were non-toxic and safe and not hard or not easy to kill. We started putting those on the neighborhoods. We started giving those to residents in their rooms, not only for just having some green, leafy natural pieces to their room, but also to give them something to take care of and give them a little bit more purpose because they were stuck in their rooms for so long. And then I even have a resident who is able to propel himself outside, and he loves the animals, and we got him a bird feeder and a little squirrel table that has like the corn that you screw into it, because he was feeding them all sorts of things that he had in his room, like popcorn and chips and things like that. So we had to save the squirrels and chipmunks and get him that little thing. So we're finding ways to kind of incorporate it, but we would love to get back to normal and go on trips and things like that again.
I bet he was very popular with the squirrels, though, because squirrels love all that stuff. Even if it might not be good for them, they still love it. That's awesome. I also wondered if there was anyone. Oh, go ahead.
Allie Roach also put in a chat entry, and her observation is pretty much online with what Brittany said. It's about staffing. They'd love to do more, but staffing in the current COVID situation is really puts a little brakes on things. Leanne says the dementia wing has a courtyard enclosed within the unit, so they have free access. Those who are flight risk wear a device and are signed out for our outings, and boy, the freedom they feel is rewarding. So that's good.
I bet
yes,
that's true.
As I was sitting on the presentation, all I kept thinking was, wow, I wish we could hire a rec therapist specifically for outdoor programming, just so that was their main focus. There wasn't all of this other craziness going on, and then we could really get people out. But I don't know if our budget would allow for that, but I wrote a note, so I might try to push it.
That's a great idea. So a couple of you mentioned just capacity, and volunteers certainly help support that capacity. Are any of you seeing those volunteers coming back yet? Is there still? Are you allowing them back? I'm sure there's probably differences in terms of where your comfort level is or where your policies are, but anyone sharing information? Not yet, Rachel says. Okay. It sounds like you're not also. Okay.
Our volunteers, some of them are coming back, but what happened was because of the pandemic and stuff, and because we're stricter in skilled nursing, they found other opportunities, and now we lost a few. We're trying to get them back.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. Whether during when things maybe calmed down a little bit, there may have been the comfort level wasn't quite there. And then, like you're saying, they may have, because these are people who want to do something and they don't want to just sit idly by. So they're going to get, swooped up by other causes or organizations. I completely get that. So, and Leanne says we lost 80% of our volunteers and have recently shut down due to the high community spread. Yeah. So that's I imagine the volunteer network and building that back up is going to require some capacity and some real focus. And when you're already limited in staffing, that's challenging too.
Unfortunately, my community, we have gotten rid of all of our volunteer coordinators as well. So we used to have a position for that. And just over time, as people retired, they quit filling those positions. So now that's also on the lifestyle engagement recreation team, which is just another added layer. So we're really, really challenged with volunteers, and they're such a crucial part of our team. I was thinking though, I've noticed a lot of jobs and companies in the Pittsburgh area are offering VTO time to their employees, which I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's paid time that the company gives you to go volunteer for a day. So I'm hoping that once we open our doors back up to volunteers, that we can start reaching out to some of those companies and maybe seeing if we can partner with them to get their employees to come volunteer for us.
Yeah, that sounds like a great program. I know that some facilities have had a lot of luck with high school students, which I know still isn't necessarily a viable option right now because of COVID. But I was surprised by that, honestly. But they said, you know, the high schools often require volunteer. You know, they have volunteer requirements. And these young people come in with such vibrance and enthusiasm. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't know if anyone else had any luck with high school students or even college students in the past, but I was impressed by that. So we can just flick to the next slide just so folks have my contact information, Dan. And again, I'm hoping to, like I said, with the Department of Aging, solicit some interest from facilities. We are focusing on Lehigh Valley and Center region for now because, and I'm sorry if that leaves folks out, but if you have an interest in perhaps pursuing a pilot project, feel free to contact me because I would be interested just to, you know, there may be, I don't know what DCNR can bring to the table, but this is certainly a component of our statewide outdoor recreation plan, and I will strongly fight for it. And I know the secretary and others are supportive of this effort. So if there is an interest, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you. Again, I think it's just, you know, baby steps, trying to identify how we can eliminate or overcome some of these barriers and establish some resources. And part of that, I really think, is a network of volunteers that might be specifically interested in supporting this. And I think, again, about all those people who go outdoors all the time. You know, they go for walks in their communities. And wouldn't it be phenomenal if we could get them trained and background checked to take someone in your facilities for a walk on a regular basis?
Nicole, do you know of a website off the top of your head or from your experience that helps connect volunteers to their opportunities?
So I've been talking with, so ARP and RSVP are like the two that I've been kind of thinking about, but I think you're talking about maybe something a little bit more, it's almost like, and I'm sure there's something like that exists. Like, it's like an Angie's List for volunteers. You put out your need and then, you know, kind of figure out, and I can do some research and see if there's any reliable sources out there for that. I mean, I guess part of the challenge is, again, those background checks. How many of you require background checks? Is that a typical requirement for volunteers in your facilities, or does it depend on the type of facility?
I know for skilled nursing, that is a requirement.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
Nicole, if you want to start a website, let me know. I love making websites now. We can get something started.
All right. Okay. Well, that might be a good step forward. Yeah. Yeah. I like
I
that
was saying,
idea.
since the
And
Jerry
I also-
Zandowski scandal, every volunteer usually needs some kind of background check.
Yeah, I thought that was the case. I think that there's certain tiered or certain levels of facilities that may not, like if it's do assisted care facilities maybe not need them. I don't know. I know that there were some folks who had said to me that they don't use them because their facility didn't necessarily require it per the regs, but I'll definitely look into that. And I do love the idea of developing a website where we can connect people like this. And also the corporate component is maybe another angle to that as well, Britt, where you might be able to get organizations to kind of feed their employees into a website where it's showing that kind of need. So.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put our final slide up, which will also have your contact information. Let's see.
I'll just note that Leanne mentioned in Erie they have Get Connected, which sounds like it's a volunteer opportunity website as well.
I just Googled it, and there is a site called Volunteer Match. I don't know how credible the site is or anything like that, but it looks like it's how you can sign up to be a volunteer. And then you can also put your organization on here. I'd have to play with it a little bit more, but maybe that's
Yeah, right. You're right. Volunteer Match is a great website. I've used that a few times for opportunities.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I'm going to make a real quick change to the show because I could see I used one of my wrong slides. There we go. Okay. I hope my slide is up big. Everybody can see that. I want to again thank Nicole for this great presentation and sharing your resources with us and vice versa. I hope that you got some good feedback from us. The code phrase for today's session.
Can I just say thank you? I just want to thank everyone because this was a great discussion, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Nicole, I want to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have just butt in like that.
No, you're good.
Thank you.
I'm done.
So special thanks to Nicole for that. The code phrase is get outside for today's session. And it's worth 1.5 hours of NCTC PRC credit or 0.1 CEU. The Survey Monkey link was posted in the chat box by Brittany. Thank you. It's the same link for all the sessions. You just go ahead and change your session name on the pull drop-down menu. Again, sometime after all the sessions are ended on the 8th of October, we'll be getting you out a summary for those who view the live sessions. And we will continue to add into that summary until December 31st when the recorded sessions go